Hey, this is Dave Ron. I'm doing the collaboration workshop. You're hanging in there with me. I've got a quick insight for you and I want to call it to your attention. Back in the 50s, a social scientist named Morton Deutsch talked about something he called goal structures. And it's a fascinating concept that I think has really helped me an awful lot when I try to imagine how I want to organize a particular ministry or teaching experience in any kind of particular way. You can see that he talks about the difference between a cooperative goal structure versus a competitive goal structure or even an individual goal structure. Let me explain. I think it'll make sense to you. A competitive goal structure is when I set up a game so that there's only one winner. Everybody else is a loser. If I was teaching a class and there's 14 people in the class and I said, hey, I'm going to give out 2 A's, that's all. I've created a competitive goal structure because only 2 people can get A's. Everybody else doesn't get A's. They start to it creates the atmosphere by which they proceed. I think Donald Trump and the Celebrity Apprentice and all that sort of world, absolutely. Competitive goal structure. The dog-eat-dog environment they sort of celebrate and romanticize in economic high-rolling finance conditions. Well, there are places for competitive goal structures, but there's consequences there too. There's also an individual goal structure, by the way, when it comes to learning. That is, it doesn't sort of matter how you achieve or fail at your goal. Your success only affects you. And so I go off by myself and I do my work and I get graded on my work and it's just me and nobody's connected to that. Okay, good enough. But then there's this thing that's called a cooperative goal structure. And it's the one that I think has got all kinds of potential for us to think about. There's a richness as it relates to collaboration. A cooperative goal structure is basically this. The only way I can win is when my team wins with me. I remember Scott Martin, back in the 70s, campus life kid from my Norwell High School days. And Scott was doing the devotional on a trip that we had some Norwell kids and some Elmhurst kids, and they were all guys, and we were mountain climbing in the Tetons. And we had this great base camp not far from the start of Buck Mountain. And as we gathered together around a stream that day that we'd hiked up to the base camp and we sort of did a little devotional thought, and I asked Scott to sort of lead that. I felt like it would be a good stretch. And he came up with this thing that was just brilliant. He said, hey, you guys, when we climbed Buck Mountain there, and it was right there in the background with its snow on its peak and everything. He said, when we climb Buck tomorrow, let's just make one agreement right now. Either all of us make it to the top or none of us make it to the top. Well, he didn't know that right there and then he was setting in motion a cooperative goal structure. We either all make it or don't make it. At that moment, sitting there by the stream, everybody was all revved up and rah-rah about that. Hands in. These guys were all football players, some defensive backs, some lineman types. They all, yeah, let's do this. Lots of excitement. Well, the next day as we were hiking, a couple of the big offensive linemen were struggling. The altitude was tough, and they were carrying a lot more weight. One of the guys, Troy Lee, about 100 feet from the summit, sat down and said, I'm done, you guys. I can't go any further. It was a little steeper from there on that he just sat and said, I'm done. Well, nobody said anything, but they all sat down. And pretty soon, it's just kind of awkward silence. And I'm watching what's going on. This couldn't play out better for me. And sure enough, he says, you guys just go on ahead. And somebody just kind of said, Troy, we said nobody's going to make it. Nobody's going to climb to the top unless we all climb to the top. Well, that set him off. I mean, he was mad. He did not want to be the reason that everybody didn't get to the top of the mountain. I mean, he was mad. He spewed out all kinds of language. He tried to grab the little guy so he could beat it out of him, and that didn't work. He couldn't reach them. He just mad. So he went into a period of just sort of quiet sulking and pouting. And pretty soon, without a word, he stood up and just started hiking up. Everybody looked at each other, a little half grin, and they started following too. Sure enough, everybody made it to the top, and nobody celebrated more than Troy. He immediately turned to me then and said, hey, can I roll down? It was a long trip. That's a cooperative goal structure. When you set something up so that if somebody comes or goes, it doesn't really matter. You haven't created a cooperative goal structure. When you set something up so that somebody's contribution is optional instead of necessary, that's not a cooperative goal structure. Set something up so that the only way they can succeed is when they succeed together. One last illustration on this. I used to love doing this in class with undergrads. I'd create team project assignments. Some of you may have had those in different classes. 6 of you peel off, you have to do a presentation. You're going to get 1 grade. Not 6 grades, you're going to get 1 grade. There's always somebody in that group who's really good. And I like to set those things up, and inevitably, I would have some group have some of that, one of those persons who is really sharp come to me frustrated. Frustrated because so-and-so isn't carrying their weight. They're not showing up to meetings, they're not doing their part. And basically they're saying, I don't want my grade to rest on this guy, this slacker's poor performance. I got him just where I want him. Because I just lean into him and say, so what would you like me to do? I want you to tell him. I want you to fix. I want you to, no, I'm not going to do that. Here's why. Because when you get into ministry, you're going to work with people who perform exactly as intensely and passionately as you do, and then there's some who don't. But you're connected to all of them. And it's going to be your job to figure out how you get us all moving in the same direction. That's a cooperative goal structure in action. Hope that makes sense, because collaboration is rich when you understand that.